begin our meeting. We'll open with a prayer from Councilmember Huckabee.
Pray with me. Heavenly Father, we come to you today grateful for the gift of life and for all of your many blessings. Lord, I ask that you be with us during this meeting, that we would make decisions that are glorifying to you, Lord. I ask that you be in our midst tonight and help us build bridges instead of walls, Lord. I ask that you grant us unity of purpose and of mind and help us make decisions that will be in the best interest of our city, our residents, our staff, and all involved, Lord. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I call this meeting to order. If you'll rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is open forum. And I don't believe we have anyone signed up for open forum. All right, we'll move on to our regular agenda. Number 4, City Council receives staff recommendations and public input on the following items and may deliberate and take formal action on the item. A, consider award of bid to MN Court Services, LLC, in the amount of $67,500 for the repair and conversion of 4 tennis courts into 12 pickleball courts at Maroney Park. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. One of the items identified in the Parks Master Plan was the rehabilitation or restoration of the tennis courts at Maroney Park because they were in poor condition. Now, that recommendation wasn't turn it into A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. It was simply you have an underutilized resource in a great part of town. Why don't you consider doing something with it? And that's kind of as far as the recommendation went in the Parks Master Plan. So staff had discussions with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And ultimately, that body recommended that we move forward with some cost estimate for demolition and rebuilding of that facility so that it could be a dual-purpose tennis and pickleball. Now, that doesn't mean that was the only option. That was just the option that the advisory board had suggested that we proceed with. And so you saw that a year and a half ago in the CIP presentation. To give you an idea of the tennis courts that we have there at Maroney Park, we have 4 of them, or 4 that are laid out for tennis, rather, because only one of them has a tennis net, and that's in that far back corner. And you can see some white lines on those 2 in the front court, and that's where, until recently, the pickleball group had been playing on Saturdays and sometimes on Sundays. They've since moved over to the newly opened Bonita Creek multipurpose court, where we have 6 of those painted. But you can see this is the one court that we have at Maroney for tennis, and if you've ever played tennis, it's not very conducive to playing on that court right there. So for the long-term solution, as in 30 plus years, was that demolition and rebuilding. And until recently, we didn't know that there was an option to resurface them. Well, municipalities all across the United States have been taking a look at their underutilized tennis facilities or flat concrete surfaces because pickleball is on such a rise in popularity and are resurfacing them. And so instead of doing a demolition and rebuild, resurface. So on October 5th, we solicited bids for invitation to bid where cost was a primary factor. So this isn't one where you list the big scope and then you have individual price items. This is, here's a scope of work that we would like accomplished, provide a cost for doing so. And on October 27th, we opened 3 bids. MN Court Services was the low bidder at $67,500. And to give you an idea, that company has done work for Texas A&M, TCU. They've been in business for over 20 years. And in just the last 8 months have done 5 court resurfacing projects. That's not 5 courts, but 5 sites, rather, with multiple courts at each site, and for 3 different municipalities. When I visited with the owner of the company, I said, give me an idea of what size, number of courts you're working at. The one that they just completed in Shreveport was 20. So this is a smaller project for them, and so we're very lucky that they gave us a bid. So Mayor and Council, consideration this evening is considering award of a contract to M&N Services for $67,500 to resurface the tennis courts at Maroney Park to create 12 pickleball courts. And I'd be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
Great. Anyone want to speak to this item? Okay. Council, questions, comments?
I just didn't realize how popular pickleball has become. after watching one day at the rec center, I'm interested now.
All right.
I may change my mind soon, but yeah, I think it's, well, this is really something that's important.
Great. Anybody else? Okay.
I just think it's really great, and I think you all are so energetic and have done so much on your own also. I just want to commend all you pickleball players, and thanks. So
Okay. Do I have a motion on A?
I'll move to award the contract as delineated in item 4A.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All right. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move on to B. Consider a donation of $67,500 from an anonymous donor and budget amendment for the rehab of the tennis courts at Maroney Park for use as pickleball courts. Bray.
Yes, Mayor and Council, once again, Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. This is allowing the acceptance of the donation for the item that you just awarded the bid for, and the budget amendment to do so. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any public comment on this?
You know you'd hear from me, right, Mayor? I want to thank, that's not my phone. I'm Robert McCandless, and I'm with USA Pickleball. And I just, want to thank Brian and Tommy, who have followed along with us, allowed us to tape off courts at the gym every day for a year or so now. Has set up things for us volunteers to paint those courts and make it's kind of like a diamond here in Nacogdoches. Or let's say a ruby. We're fixing to get a diamond. Somebody donates $67,000. That money, that's just $67,000. That's a drop in the bucket as to what this city can make on being a pickleball destination. The people are taking vacations, going for a week, 2 weeks at a time, to be around pickleball and play pickleball. If we can develop that into that, it's just going to be a payoff for everybody. And we're blessed.
Thank you. I believe that.
And Roy, we'll be easy on you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Council, any comments or questions?
I guess my only question is, not having been through the process of accepting a donation of this, first of all, this size, which is incredible to me, but accepting from anonymous donors, is that a typical practice for us? What have we done in the past? And do we see these things come by very often? I mean, what is the...
So, yes, sir, we've done this in the past. Either you can make a donation in someone's honor, you can remain anonymous, or, however you would like to word it. So the city has in the past accepted donations in a number of ways. As far as frequency, I'm not sure how often, in terms of the Parks and Recreation world, we've seen 2 of them in the last 2 years and hadn't seen any in the previous several years. So we've been very blessed with a donation from this anonymous donor and then from Pilgrims just 2 years ago.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have thought, Mr. Bolden, I might be willing to play with you. I don't know.
I would need somebody young.
I don't know if they'll take it easy on me, though, so.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Do we have a motion on 4B? Excuse
I
me.
make a motion to approve item 4B as presented.
All right. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. All right, thank you, and certainly thank you to you guys for pushing this forward, and to our donor as well for helping us to fund this project. So, good work. All right, we'll move to number 5, work session. Hold a discussion and give direction regarding the capital improvement plan for the city of Nacogdoches, which could include the future appointment of a citizens committee, debt financing, and addressing the immediate unfunded capital needs identified by city departments. City manager.
Yes, sir, Mayor, members of council, Mario Canizaro. Mario Canizar, City Manager. So, I'll give them just a sec.
Sorry.
Okay. We good? All right, Mayor, members of council, Mario Canizar, City Manager. So, this conversation, is sort of follows sort of in line with conversations we had a couple of weeks ago. We were here in this room. We went over a series of questions that we had that we would like for you all to ponder. And so we're hoping tonight that we can receive some of the responses to those questions. And so, we're gonna go through some things. We've provided some additional details. You've got a copy of this presentation at your place. It's been uploaded onto, City Clerk, our online agenda management software as well. And so you'll be seeing this presentation here online. Just kind of get into it. What we talked about back on the 27th, again, just very highlights. We talked about the capital improvement plan. We've been talking about that since last November. As you recall, we had meetings all last year, 4 meetings in November. We had a meeting in December, and then we had a follow-up meeting in April to kind of lay out a series of priorities that we wanted to work on. We talked about the tiered prioritization of the projects and then funding sources. So I'm not going to go through all that. I just wanted to highlight just kind of a recap of what we talked about. The underlined areas really are the bulk of the presentation tonight. What we would like to do is, as I mentioned, is get responses to some questions that were posed last time and see if we can, where we want to head with this. And then secondly is get direction from council on how do we address some of the immediate capital needs that were identified by the department. So once I'm completed with my piece and we hopefully can answer all the questions you have, I'll be inviting Chief Kiplinger and then Mr. Bray and then Mr. Bartlett to come in and kind of do a wrap-up of those items as well, and again, get direction on how we want to proceed with those items. And again, just as a reminder, on the 27th, no action was taken. We're not asking for action taken tonight. We're just looking for some direction. There's no formal action needed tonight. So one of the questions that was brought forward last time was, do we want to consider a bond program? And I made a little adjustments because it's not just a bond program. Or do we want to also consider some debt financing to address our unfunded capital needs? That was one of the questions. And the second one was, as part of it, if we do want to do a debt program, do you only want to keep it narrowed to what the original CO was, the 20 or 21 million, or do you want to do something more? And so I don't know, Mayor, if you want to just stop and have some discussion on each of these before we proceed, or do you want me to, and I'm going to recap at the very end as well with all the questions and try to get some directions. It's up to you how would you like for us to proceed.
What you have a preference, council?
I would like to go through.
Go through it and then.
Because some of my input on this relates to, the committee and the committee's
Sure.
function and all
Understood.
that. So.
Okay, so I'll keep going. So one of the things that you all asked for as well was some financial metrics. You also asked for a series of additional data sets on the capital needs. And so Steve Bartlett and our city engineering folks provided you a thick binder last week, so you have copies of that as well. That's not loaded into this presentation, but you have that to read at your convenience. And so you all asked for some financial metrics, and so we wanted to kind of go through those. One of the questions you asked is what are our current debt levels for all of our funds? And again, I can certainly read this, but you can see this on the screen. We have one series of tax notes that we have in the general fund because if you recall, we had some series of debt being defeased last month or month of August and September. And so the only thing that's left to be paid off is $1.3 million, and that is for the ladder truck for the fire department. And as you can see, that's the balances that are due, and then the date of it when it's expected to be defeased. And regarding to the utility funds, we've got $23.2 million in outstanding debt, and we've got 3 issuances: one from 2004, one from 2006. And one a refunding in 2020 which total again $23,200,000. So those are the two areas that we have debt at the city. Is one in the general fund, which is very small amount, and then some at the utility fund. And these are balances as of literally this week. And if I understand correctly, Ms. Curbo, our next debt payment will be next February. So next February will be our next debt payment. So these are balances that are current as of this time. Any questions from here? Can I move on? Okay. And this may be a little bit more difficult to see for those in the audience, but we have a copy of there, and the spreadsheet, when you lay it all out, is fairly wide. And so what I did is I just split them into basically one chunk on one side and one chunk on the other. So I wanted to just break it up. So what we wanted to show here is just to kind of give you some comparables. When we were going through this process just a few weeks ago through the CO issuance, it was $21 million. That was the equivalent of 6.6 cents on the tax rate per 100. So that kind of gives you a perspective. Since that didn't happen, and that was before any freezes on seniors or any additional exemptions were added to seniors, and when that was put into effect this year, we just wanted to just give you a comparison that if we were to do the same $21 million in issuance, it would be the equivalent of 7.8 cents per 100. Because again, we're taking value off the appraisal district because of the seniors' exemptions. Plus, we've frozen their taxes. The taxes are frozen. So when that debt was removed, that lowered the tax rate. And so that debt, if you're 65 years and older, as of literally right now, your tax levy will not go up. So because of that loss of not a loss, but that additional exemption plus that freeze, that increase for everyone that's not 65 years and older and the other remaining classes of properties, it's a 1.2 cent increase to basically recoup that 21 million or 18%, if that makes sense. And so then if you move down that same slide, just to be able to just to give you a comparison, the proposed tax rate that was included with the CO issuance was 0.58480, and it is now 0.5188. So that's 6.6 cents difference. And again, just as a comparable, that for every 1 penny on the debt rate, it's the equivalent of, depending on how long you want to issue that debt, if it's for 20 years or 25 years, every penny generates between 2.3 and 2.6 million. So again, this is just a perspective so you can understand, you can start doing the math. A penny on the tax rate equates to this, et cetera. And then the last piece of the slide, or last piece of the spreadsheet, again, it is split into two. It just gives you an idea of if you were to issue 10 million of debt, it's 4.4 to 4.5 cents. If you do 20, 7.5 to 8, and so forth. So again, it kind of starts giving you some ideas in these chunks of debt levels if you want to do that. So, and then again, the reason that we're giving you ranges is because it depends. Some of that debt may be 20 years, some of that debt may be 25 years. So, and based on comments that Ms. Curbo mentioned to me just a minute ago, they're basing those values and they're basing that the interest rates that they're using, our financial advisors, is 4.75%. So in September, it was 3.7%. It just gives you an idea the increases in the interest rates because that's what's happening in the markets. Any questions so far on the financial metrics? Okay, moving on. On the water system side, the utilities fund side, again, in this kind of the same vein, you already know how much we have in outstanding debt. So in the same vein, what we wanted to show is if we were to issue about $15 million worth of revenue bonds, just before we do any type of rate restructuring or rate review, which currently we're in the process of having an RFP on the street to procure consulting services to do a rate review, just based on how things are right now as we speak, status quo, if we were to issue $15 million in revenue bonds for water system improvements, it would be about a 10% increase across all rate classes, okay? And so for every 1% that you increase, it's about $1.5 million that you can increase in debt capacity, okay? Very simple. On the wastewater side, if you were to issue $25 million worth of revenue bonds, it's about an 18% increase across the board. And so for every 1% rate increase, it's the equivalent of $1.4 million in debt. So any questions on that?
So could you really quickly summarize what is our total, what are we looking at for water system and wastewater systems? I forget the total number that we're looking at as tier one.
Is it on one of the slides there?
And my second question to that is, what are we talking about increases in water? That's my bottom line question. If we generate 50 million worth of revenue bonds, and that's 10%, and 25 million worth of revenue bonds for wastewater, and that's 18%, what exactly are we totally talking about as far as water increases for the amount of money we're anticipating spending on water system and wastewater system?
Could you repeat it again, Ms.?
Sure. If $15 million worth of revenue bonds will increase our rates, our water rates, is that correct, by 10%? And if $25 million worth of revenue bonds for wastewater system will increase the wastewater charges by 18% for each person, what is the bottom line of what we're looking at for water and wastewater increases for the amount of tier one needs we have for water and wastewater?
I'm not quite sure how to, I mean, I think, oh, are they? Okay.
You can, I mean, just roughly, I'm not, you don't have to get it to the penny or anything, I'm just trying to figure out how much the water bills are gonna go up. Right. Yeah, I know. And you can keep going, I just would like to know that
Okay.
eventually. I didn't mean to stall the whole process.
Well, and again, keep in mind that this is based on how things are laid out today. I mean, part of that RFP is to come in and work with, hopefully, a committee to look at what are, based on what staff recommends as tier one, and do they agree, and then working through that process so that rate study calculates not only what will be needed from a capital improvement perspective, but also the usage of water, who are the customers. So it's going to get restructured.
So you're looking for some guidance on whether to use money, ARPA dollars for one thing versus ARPA dollars for another. That influences how much our water bills go up, influences my thinking about ARPA dollars. That's the reason I'm asking these questions.
Sure. And then the other thing that we brought up too was a timeline. If we do proceed with the bond program, do you want to do this in May of next year, or do you want to do this in November of next year? And what we provided here is a Gantt chart. And so I just want you to be able to point out that if we were to proceed with something in May, it does, just based on where we are today, it's November the 10th, where we are today, you all would have to make some decisions to put something on the ballot by mid-February. And so that really does not give you a whole lot of time if you want to appoint a committee, unless you just want to narrow the projects down in scope. So, and we would not be able to procure any consulting assistance. So again, we're not recommending May, but we wanted to show that if we were to try to do something in May, it's extremely accelerated and doesn't give a whole lot of time. There's plenty of time for public input, but not a lot of time for some of that involvement that you all have been asking for. And so the same goes for November, same Gantt chart. And you see the one in May, it has sort of almost like a grayed out lines there. That just, again, indicates that we would not be able to use those key line items. But then if we were to go in November, it does afford us a lot more opportunity to not only form a committee, work with the consultants, do the public meetings, all the components that again, it gets more involvement with the public. And so again, from our perspective, we would prefer a November election. Okay.
So, and I apologize, I'm pulling this up with a small phone. So, our tier one, total tier one projects cumulatively, but you're asking for just the stuff that would be in the utility, correct, the revenue bond section. So if it's okay, I'm gonna read a few numbers out to you. So the water portion was 61,772,000. The wastewater was 35,225,000.
Okay,
And those would make up the two utility components.
that's 97 million,
Correct,
almost 100 million.
correct.
So, and then the water bills would go up.
Well, and certainly as Mr. Canizares was saying, the water study that's across all rate users that would be the average. So you may see commercial and industrial have a different, as opposed to a minimal water user, residential water user may see a very little impact. I mean, that's part of what we'll bring to you is consideration.
But on the slide before, if we could go back to that slide, we're talking 100 million and that's 35, so it's about 3 times that. Thank you.
So would you recommend that amount to us, you think?
So I don't think that's where we are tonight, if that makes sense. What we're showing you is our basket is full of projects. There's limitations as to what not only your appetite and the public's appetite for debt is, but we wanted to show you the metrics of what it means. And we've all known that if we did the whole basket, it's beyond.
Yeah.
It's beyond. So the question that I think maybe we come out from our capital committee, come out from this council, come out from staff, is where is the sweet spot? And it's gonna be a matter of what we can afford versus what we can get done. And so I don't think I have an answer, Mayor. It's part of what we're trying to focus on.
Right.
But just as of now, we hadn't adjusted any tier one projects, right? Either remove them or add some of the tier two.
We've done very little as we speak. Some of the prices have been changing.
Yeah.
We've been adjusting, but in general, no. The tier one projects you see 60-ish million of water is
That's
still 60 million.
all that is still on board.
Yeah, yes, sir, it's correct. And what we'll talk about in a minute is the ARPA dollar part, is we've just pulled some of those out in
Right,
general
right, yeah.
cases.
So I just want to, Pam, you could correct my math here, my very quick math. But, so the water system improvements would be quadrupled, so that would, I mean, using these same dollars, it would be 40% increase. And then the wastewater systems is really just by a third, so what, 25?
Yeah, the wastewater,
That's less.
of the 35 million, that's tier one, 25-ish of it is the Lanana Bonita Creek,
Right.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
25 of that 35 is the Lanana Bonita Creek, and so that's kind of what we used to calculate that 18%, because we did that this summer, because you wanted to know how much would it cost to do that one project by bonds. And so on the sewer side, yeah, the majority of it we're gonna be able to get within a 20-25% across the board. The water is where we're gonna have to kind of pare down from that 61 million, what truly can we do within our rate structure? Yeah.
Can people?
Are we, willing to do at
Thank you
at
very
one point.
much. I really appreciate it.
Sorry.
It really helps to give a broad,
Yeah.
a good overview of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Anybody else here have comments? Okay.
Any questions on the timeline? Then the question becomes, what about a committee? So we had asked council to consider identifying some names, 10 to 15 names. And I have a slide here that talks a little bit about the roles and responsibility. And again, this is all open for discussion, so it's just trying to provide some level of structure, but it's all open for conversation. And then certainly we would like to see if that's appropriate or possible to get those appointments made this December, so we can get going and then start kicking off meetings in December. Not wait too late into the holidays, but we know that December is difficult, but at least get the committee started so that we can really begin in earnest in January. And so, again, just roles of the committee and the responsibilities. Again, I'm not going to read it, but the Capital Needs Advisory Committee, I really wanted to avoid just calling it a bond committee, because I think this kind of gives it a broader scope for the citizens to come in and talk about not just a bond program, what you would think of a typical GO bond program going to the voters, but revenue bonds, maybe some other cash options that may be out there based on city's cash position over the next few years based on water sales and things of that nature. So again, the roles is to really look at infrastructure through and through: roads, storm drainage, quality of life amenities, city facilities, water and wastewater and other city assets, and then kind of broaden that just because it could be buildings, it could be airport things, it could be a whole host of things. So just, excuse me, wanted to just make that broad. And then, obviously, as part of that committee, what they do, a lot of research and analysis, doing tours, receiving reports, certainly from staff or from certainly the public, from consultants and other experts in that respective field. The intent, again, is to look at how they can look at recommending funding sources, whether it's through debt service or cash or other means, and certainly consider the impacts going through that process with our financial advisor to make sure as these decisions are being made or being recommended that they have a fairly good understanding what is the financial impact for residents and businesses here in Nacogdoches. Again, part of their responsibility is to maintain attendance because there's a lot to work to be done in a short period of time. And then certainly this is just something that was carried over from some other committees, is if the council would like to maintain this group or appoint a different group to provide, if we were to go down this process of doing a bond program, if you would want to consider maintaining them or another group as an oversight process. So again, this is just wanted to put something on screen, and certainly this is up for consideration. It's kind of what these committees do. Any questions so far? The other question that we brought forward was we do need some help, as I mentioned. Doing a bond program, no matter how big or how small, it's a big lift. Even just doing the CO issuance was a big lift, especially during the budget process, and we were going through a lot of different things this past summer. So it is a huge, huge burden, certainly for the city secretary, city attorney, our office, my office, and finance and the department. So we're really requesting some assistance for staff augmentation and plus consultants to help us through this process. I don't believe our city has ever gone through a bond program, so we need that expertise to help us, especially as consultants that do this for cities all over the state. We would like to help get them to help us facilitate their expert assistance through cost analysis, cost estimation, the reviewing of materials for providing materials for the committee members to review. And we believe for about $150,000 gets us started, we can go ahead and get this process. It doesn't mean we're going to spend all of that at once, but we believe that as we get further into this process, there will be a number of meetings that we will need their assistance. So this is just to get us started. Any questions? So again, oh, I'm sorry.
I thought I had a question, but it was the slide before.
On the committees?
It
You wanna go
left
back
me.
one?
But I did have another question on the timeline. I just wanted to clarify that the major difference between trying to hold a bond election in May versus November is just that prolonged time, right, for staff preparation of the projects and then the capital, like the committee meetings. Is
Pretty
that
much.
correct?
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
the main big difference?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And on the advisory committee, who's going to vet the expected members of that committee?
Council. I mean, there would be council appointees.
Right, but staff with the expertise, knowing what's needed to identify issues within any project should be involved.
As far as selecting the names or recommending
Yes,
names?
selecting the persons, yeah.
Well, I mean, you certainly, if a council member is interested in bouncing a name off of myself or the city engineer, or if you're looking for someone with more of a financial bent with Ms. Curbo, any of us would be happy to lend an ear, but ultimately it's really up to you all who you want to appoint. What I was thinking is if we could keep it to about 15, it's a fairly manageable group. I would suspect they would probably break up into subcommittees so that we could kind of work in earnest on specific topics, because if we're going to be doing tours, I'm not saying all 15 can't tour, but it's much easier to be able to schedule 3 to 5 people on a tour than it is to schedule 15 all at once. Again, it's open to them to attend, but we're really more focusing on those individuals that are interested in that area. And so So it's really kind of your pleasure. I would think you would want to have people that represent folks in your respective wards, except for the mayor, because he's at large. But I thought that was the intent, is to try to provide that level of representation across the whole community, not just certain segments of the community.
And I guess my point that I was trying to make, it's not just people we're looking for. We're looking for people that have expertise in certain fields. I mean, I could go out and say, oh, this need to be done, that need to be done, but,
You know, Councilmember, I think it just depends. I mean, I think that's why, staff is gonna be at these meetings. That's why we're expecting to have those consultants, whether it's engineer, architectural folks there. I mean, those are certainly subject matter experts. They see this all the time. They work with communities day in, day out on various projects. So, what we're looking for is people with open minds, people that are open-minded, that are willing to roll up their sleeves, get into the projects, understand, and hopefully, recommend things that we need to be doing and that hopefully are opportunities to advance and improve our community.
I mean, because the idea is, right, that staff and then whatever consultants we have will be providing the expertise part of it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then again, the part of the role of the committee is after all this is done, I mean, they're gonna, they go through their process, their own negotiations, I'm sure amongst themselves. We would expect there's some recommendations would come out of that and would land here at council, and then you all make the choice of what goes and what doesn't.
So I'd like to broaden this discussion out a little bit, mostly because I've asked probably 15 people what they think a bond committee or what's the capital improvements advisory, capital needs advisory committee, who they would have on it, why they would have them, what their role would be. And so some of the functions that they said are not included in what we'd already talked about. This is a new thing for us. And one of the biggest interests that the biggest interest everybody had is that you want a committee, including people who may not, who may ask a lot of questions. You want a committee that once they say, yes, these are good things, can pass the bond. And so, so those people need to be, represent not just, wards or whatever, but they need to represent people who are going to vote. And they need to have the trust that if they say, yes, I've finally vetted this whole thing, and
Right.
this is the package we think. And so my thinking is very different than where I started out after listening to all these people. You want sometimes you want people who may not look as, but who will ask all the good questions. So
Sure.
that's somebody, I'm thinking we need people who will ask all the questions. And I would like to give them a little more responsibility. I'd almost like to ask them to identify whether they feel like they need a consultant and which consultants they need. I'd like to give them the more authority, the more responsibility, the more we put trust in these particular people, the better chance we have of passing this bond. And that's the whole goal here. We want to be able to borrow money that we need for our infrastructure. So I'd like to think about that committee and maybe select names I don't quite know how, but maybe in a little different process. I was also thinking that the committee would keep the council apprised every single step of the way and say, this is where we are. Oh, now we know we need this. Now we'd like to hire, such and such to advise. I'm just broadening the concept of who this committee is. And I wouldn't even mind if it were larger, as long as this group of people could represent the city. In fact, I've researched they're called bond committees, but capital needs advisory committees in other areas, and then people have served on other bond committees, and so that's what I'm thinking about.
questions.
So I'd like to just start that conversation about a broader kind of thinking about this committee.
So I have thoughts on it too, you and I have discussed that. I want us to, I don't want to derail our discussion about the questions that lead us to the committee. I think our conversation is kind of leading in the direction that we already know the answers to those. But when we get to where we're talking specifically about that, I think our process for appointing a committee, and I've shared this with you, I think we need to follow a similar approach to how we appoint boards and commissions, where we interview those people and we try and amalgamate some kind of, where we try and see who fits where, and push inputs and outputs to see what the best cohesive group can be. And I just see that just whoever I want on the committee, that may not be what's best for the city, just based on who I could pick. I mean, and I'm sure you all feel the same way too. So that's, when we get there and we dive into those details, that's something I'd like for us to consider.
Any thoughts, Ms. Fisher?
Not right now.
Bolden?
That's an interesting concept, because we've done a really good job in picking, our committees for to think about it. It may add a little bit of time up front, but it sure would help to, because people would know that they were selected by everybody, not, and they would know what their job would be. I think that has merit.
Okay.
I like
So, do we need to flesh out the comments now, Mayor, from council members Huckabee and Bellinger, or?
I mean, it seems like everybody wants a committee,
Right.
right?
I think.
Which is the question.
That's one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one of the questions, right? Do we want to move forward with a committee?
One of the questions, do you want to do May or November? Can we agree
Do you want to
November?
do that one first?
Would that be easier?
That was what I was suggesting, that I want to dive into the details of the committee stuff, but let's talk about the things that lead us to needing a committee, if that makes sense.
Sure, I mean, I'll just go to the last slide. Again, this is kind of the wrap-up. I mean, it's basically the questions that I've already asked on one slide. Is there a desire to, do a process, look at some debt issuance?
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Okay. Now
I
we're
think that on
cooking.
the next question, the effort narrower, broader in scope is going to have an effect on what our target date is.
Correct.
I don't see much way to get it done by May. I think it's gonna have to be November.
I don't think it's smart to rush
So November.
anything like this. I mean,
And also, if we're gonna do this, let's do it right and do it well and do it as much as we can one time, because I don't wanna do it again.
Okay, so it sounds broader is okay. In other words, look at all the elements of infrastructure, not
but
just,
then if we're doing broader, it needs to be November.
okay. Okay,
Well, those were easy.
I know, I feel really good right now.
You're on a roll.
I know, I'll be able to keep going. All right, so then number 4, it's, you want to appoint a committee, it sounds like that's a yes.
Yes.
So then the question becomes is, if so, how many and what process do you want to use? So,
I think that the picking versus like us picking in a vacuum 2 or 3 people, I think that Councilmember Huckabee's suggestion of doing it the way that we do board interviews.
But if you had somebody that you wanted to be on the committee,
But
get
then you
them
ask them
get
to
them
apply.
make an application, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we
that
interview
works.
them.
Yeah.
so, go ahead.
And maybe we do suggest, instead of 3 people, we do suggest maybe 4 or 5 people, and then if those individuals are willing to apply to do this, then we interview them. If they're not interested, then certainly they don't have to do that. But Mr. Canizares and I discussed the idea of having it, where just anyone can apply. We may not be able to put a timeline together where we can all interview a large number of candidates.
What I was mentioning to Councilmember Huckabee, one of our conversations was, I mean, there's no question, based on, we've got the news media here, there's been a lot of articles, a lot of conversations about infrastructure, right? Everyone's fired up about it. And so, again, I don't have a problem opening it up, but when you open it up, and let's just say, for example, you get 80 names. Well, I'm just saying, I mean, you potentially could. And we only need 15, you're gonna disappoint 65 people. And that's not a bad thing, it's just, you know, if we go through the process we do for boards and commissions, that's at least a 3 or 4 week opening. I mean, that's a 3 or 4 week window where the application process is opened up, and it just starts to chew up time. So one of the suggestions I mentioned to Mr. Huckabee was, could you provide 3 to 4, maybe 5 names, bring them, invite them to interview, and we can make an application, they can fill it out, invite them to do an interview, just like you do with your boards and commissions, and interview those 20 or so people, give or take, and select your 15 from there. And you can pose your questions however you see fit to try to find the right fit, and select from there, as opposed to opening it up, having all these applicants, and then I'm just seriously, how would you vet them? Because you can't interview them all.
If I understand, oh, I'm sorry. If I understand this, you're saying that instead of asking people to come forward and volunteer, that we actually recommend them.
Or you
and
go
then
out-
that's the pool that we invite.
Right,
to
I mean,
come.
but obviously they're going to be volunteering anyway, but you just ask them, hey, are you be willing, whomever you are, and try to, again, try to make it manageable for your time, because we are in the holidays, and we'd like to get this process hopefully done by December. But the thought was, invite 3 to 5 people to apply. We have an application we can easily complete. They can fill it out, give them a deadline, and then bring those folks. We can give a couple of dates to you all meet, and you run it through like your boards and commissions process. You interview them, and then from there, you, instead of selecting it, trying to select from 50 or more people, you're selecting really from 20, 25, if that makes sense, from your interviews.
Well,
okay.
yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying 5, and that gives each person 5. I have a hard time, because I'm gonna have to call all these people. I've had several recommendations. Some of them may overlap with other people's recommendations, but,
But a staff would prefer to keep it to about 15 people on the committee. But you could interview, again, 20 people or 25, and then pare it down to 15. That's what I'm suggesting.
Well, I look at it as, I'm going to get a lot of calls from people. Has a desire to be on this committee. But I'll sit down with each one of those and go over the roles and responsibilities, and that may eliminate down to 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's a good approach.
I mean, I definitely see the logistical problems with just having open applications. I also think having each of us invite 5 people to apply is sort of creating a similar problem to us, each of us appointing 3 people, right? Because, you know, it's still individual selections. I mean, I know that then we'll interview and then we'll all choose together, but that's my fear with that. So I don't know how to fix that, right? Like,
I mean, I think either way, there's going to be criticism, because you can't appoint everybody. If you have a large number of applicants, you can't appoint them all. So you're going to upset people that don't get appointed.
so to me, it's not whether I get criticism or I wouldn't be sitting up here. I mean, that's it.
Understood.
But it's about what is the best committee that we can have. And I do think maybe we can kind of play this by ear a little bit, or is there a way without that? I don't know if there's I don't know how to do. I think we may need like maybe even 7 if some of us have more names, or of people who who have a lot of competence, and But I'm with you.
Well,
Councilmember Fisher, I don't know how to do it, but I see what you're saying. I think it's.
Let's try to get to a workable number, but if you have 7 that you want to talk to them. I think that's great. If you have 24 you want to talk to them. That's great.
Okay.
I don't think I'll have that many, so you might be, I'll have less. So.
I think it's worth reiterating. We want a really good, if it's 15, if it's 20, if it's 21. I mean, we hit this on one of our boards. We said, wait, these are all really good people. We just want to up the number in this particular board. I think it's, I want a good committee before
I think we all do,
wanna-
and there's
Yeah,
no
right,
question. We all want that, and,
That's right.
and it's just, but we also know that we have things we gotta get done, because time is of the essence, and so,
Okay, let's create an application, and we'll get to talking to our people. Show us where it is, please, and, we'll get it rolling and be done by, how quick can we get this done? Can we get the applications back?
Ms. Vincent says she can have the application completed tomorrow, and we'll get it to you tomorrow.
Can the application include, like, putting actually in writing, are you willing to commit to X number of meetings a month or something like that? Because I think that, I mean, you know, on our other committees that we have, it might have been helpful to get that sort of commitment.
Can you give us a little
upfront.
vision on
Absolutely,
how,
we
what
can-
kind of
absolutely.
frequency and how long it would last?
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah.
I think, and again, that's sort of, it's kind of baked in. It's kind of hard to see, but if you can see on about the fourth line from the left, the committee meetings, probably 6 to 10. And there may be more, because that could be tours, but about 6 to 10.
Estimate
over-
on the high side.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely,
the-
but
for the
again,
app,
that's,
yeah.
and again, you're talking 6 to 10 over the course of 3 months.
Right.
So that's
a good bit of
That's a
meeting.
good bit of meeting,
Yeah.
absolutely.
so every other week. they
Well,
should-
potentially, and it may depend. I mean, you may count, like, if we're doing tours, that may be the meeting that because you're doing nothing but tours for that span of weeks. But then you're sitting down, working, crunching numbers, working through literally almost classroom style. So it just depends on what we're doing and what we're looking at. So, and certainly we can, not right now, but I think as we kind of flesh out these issues, we can kind of do some even Gantt charts within those meetings to see what are the critical things that we're going to be doing in the month of February, the month of March, et cetera.
So with this application process, this is a question for the council. Do we need to add questions in the application process on the front end to gather feedback from these individuals so we have an idea when we do interview them what their vision of what the committee could be, you know, what are their criteria that we want to ask them their opinions on? If you agree to serve on this committee and you agree to the time commitment and the attendance, and we have a package that committee recommends, are you saying that you will agree to support that package unequivocally? I mean, if we're going to build this consensus, that's just a suggestion. I'm not saying that's something we should include. I'm just saying, do we need to have criteria within that application on the front end?
Is that maybe a question that you ask in the interview, so you can measure the reaction that you get to the question?
For sure.
I think that,
But I think that's an unfair question, always. I mean, you know, I was asked just recently, are you going to support whatever this document is? And I go, depends what the document is. I mean, I don't think it's fair, and I don't know that that's a measure of and that's something we can talk about. But
Can I chime in here? If you start asking folks on a form like that, if they're planning to support, that becomes a political partisan advocacy that you're not allowed to do. You can talk to them about how consensus from the committee will be communicated to the community and gauge it that way.
And I think that was the point that I was really trying to say, is not to say I'm going to go and vote for this and I'm going to stomp for it. It's to say I want to build consensus and have that group.
That is a better question reserved for interviews than to try to write it down. Because it's one that requires discussion rather than a yes, no, what have you.
I don't know if you, I had broadened the scope of the committee's function. I mean, I had additional items I thought we should add, and I can go over them, but that is one of the items. You know, you are, and what did I forget how I put it? To steer the bond process toward a vote. And so I consider that the function of this committee, to steer the bond process toward a vote. That doesn't mean they're committed to whatever, but, you know, I think if they have bigger responsibilities, they can see, do I fit or do I not fit too? So I don't know if you want me to add my additional comments here, or if we want to discuss them later on, but I just want to give the committee a little broader, that they can ask for assistance, that they can go and say we need additional dollars and expertise, that I even thought they could narrow or expand the focus. I mean, instead of us giving them this particular thing, they could say, wait a minute, now that we're sitting over here, I think we ought to, as long as we're doing this bond, we ought to expand it to include this, that they see. So anyway, I just would like the committee to have a little bit more expanded responsibility, including the responsibility to take this process toward a vote. And maybe that might clarify it.
Okay.
So, one of the other things that I've suggested in the past, we're talking all of these ideas out, and you know, I could take notes the whole time and write down every detail of what we're saying. But tomorrow morning, am I going to remember all of this discussion? Is there a way that we can have this discussion and package it and try and get some kind of working document where we're figuring out what our criteria are and what we care about in this process? And that was part of the reason why I suggested that we move toward having some kind of online forum in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, where we can have those discussions when we're not necessarily sitting at this table, but it's still open to the public to be able to go and view what we're doing. Just a thought.
I mean, I think a lot of these big major questions, not only are they more suited to an interview type question, but it'll really allow us to better gauge what the answer is. Like, and so, I don't know, in that vein, I feel like we as a group have done, and only we know this because we've been, you know, the ones in the board interviews, but we've done a really good job as a team approaching board interviews and board appointments. And I feel like it happens in a very organic way. And so I trust the interview process with us to be able to be very fruitful and to address some of the things that you're mentioning, particularly like, you know, philosophy on consensus and something that you just said that I thought about that I forgot.
Well, I completely agree with you. That has been one of the most illuminating things for me being on the council, is how well this group of people works together in that board interview process. I mean, it was fantastic. And I know I've said this to you, but I think we did a really good job on that. And I think doing it that way, seeing that process is why I thought this would be a good idea, because we did work so well on that.
I mean, I think that our application should definitely just not necessarily be used in a narrowing way, but to really highlight to people, this is what you're signing up for when you're applying for this. And if you're not willing to sign up for this, then don't do it.
I have one that I've started, so I can
Okay.
send that out to you and let you look at it. It's pretty much the same as our boards and commissions application, but if I send that, I'll send it now. And then you just give me some feedback on what you would like to see. I'll get it together and run it by Mr. Canizares and Mr. Kirkland to make sure they're appropriate questions. And then once it's done, I can send it back out and you can start using it, if that's okay.
That sounds
Okay.
You're fast.
Ma'am?
You're fast.
I try.
Already started it.
So does that,
But I have a couple more questions. So just to follow up on Councilmember Huckabee's, Chad, right, you keep saying, comment. I think it would be helpful, I mean, I haven't really understood very much about this open kind of forum online, but I think in fleshing out some of these documents, I think that would be helpful because, you know, I have these other things that people have told me. And it's hard to go back and say, do we agree that this is a function or do we agree that this is a function? I think that would be very helpful. I don't know what to do with my other, I don't know what to do with these other functions of the committee. If you want them, if you don't want them, I mean, but these were things that people had suggested to me. So tell me what to do with that. And then the other thing that people have said over and over and over again is they believe the members of this committee should live in the city and pay city taxes. And as they put it, have skin in the game unless there's some very, very particular expertise that we need from somebody outside the city. But these all should be people who live in the city. That's what I've heard over and over. So I don't know if you all agree, but that's, and if that needs to be put on this form, so.
I don't have a problem with that.
With it being limited to people, no, I think that makes sense.
You good with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. And if we need expertise, we'll call it in.
So we can remove the work part.
But, I mean, there may be a member that we think, so one of the characteristics of one of the committee members, people said, was an investment advisor even on the committee. Now, you can hire one in, but if there is somebody, I don't think we should, if there is somebody who we believe has very particular expertise that we think would be an addition to the community, I mean, to this committee, I think we should just highlight it, go ahead and invite them. I don't have anybody, but there might be. I'm just saying, we don't want to eliminate somebody who's excellent, but this should be a committee of people who live in the city.
I think we agree on that.
Okay, so,
And I agree with your caveat. If there's someone that, you know, is just game changer on this particular thing, then yeah, maybe we consider it. And I don't know what anyone else's preferences are as far as how many people you've already talked to or who you're thinking about. But I agree in principle that we really need to focus on people that live in the city because they're the ones that will pay for these capital needs.
In terms of how many people each of us want to invite to apply, do we want to pick not like a written in concrete number that everyone has to stick by or else, but sort of like a ballpark idea, and then if one of us has a few more or a few less, it's okay?
yeah, sounds,
Yeah, I think that's good.
So then what number do y'all want?
5 or 6,
3 to 5, 3 to 6, 3 to 7?
Yeah,
3 to 7?
that's fine.
Yeah.
It's not gonna expand the total number of the committee,
No, but I
just the
mean, you're just giving you more
Just the
options to
number of
look at.
interviews we'll have.
Are you, I hope you say yes, are you interested in trying to have all this completed in the month of December? These interviews?
I think,
Yeah.
I think we could have the
Before the
interviews.
24th?
Let's try.
Yeah,
So
Hopefully
what I
before
would
the
ask,
23rd.
what I would ask is Ms. Vinson will finish out the application. She'll make some modifications. I think one of the questions that it says, do you work and or live? So we'll remove the work and just live.
Yeah.
And that'll be a check mark. That way it makes it easier, right? It's not really an option. But they can still apply and you can consider them, but again, we're looking for the people that live here, right? And so if we can get that out to you and you can turn around and give us your feedback of, you know, how you want to modify the application, could we at least agree that the applications be turned in by December the 2nd, which I think is a Friday or a third, December the,
that's reasonable.
So if our intention is to have this whole process complete, are we intending to appoint them by the end of December? Because we only have one scheduled council meeting in that month.
well, I think probably what you'll end up doing is you'll have to appoint them the first part of January.
But just
Your
have the
first
selection
meeting.
process done.
Just, but to have your interviews completed, because if you're gonna, I would assume it's a 2-day process if you're gonna potentially bring in, I'm just saying 30 people. It probably takes 2 days to go through that.
Yes, ma'am.
What about the schedule for January's meetings? Did we cancel the first one?
Yeah, right, it's the second week.
Third week of January.
Well, no,
Pushed it back a week.
We pushed it a week.
And that still leaves us the leeway, if we're finished, to call a very, a special meeting.
You could.
Just
for them.
do this.
Just to make the appointment, absolutely. We just don't have anything regularly scheduled, but if you all,
Anymore.
but if you all get going pretty quick and get it done, but we can call something quick.
The interview process has to be posted as an open meeting, right?
Sure, yeah, 72 hours in advance.
So on that, I mean, we had discussion on the boards and commissions whether we do it that same day or not, or if we needed to sleep on it and have some additional time. Maybe if we had the flexibility to make those appointments that day, just as an idea, that way we could have it done, and if we were ready to make that decision, then we could just go ahead and do it and have it done by whenever we have those interviews. And I don't how long did we have for Ms. Vincent on the interview length for boards and commissions? Is it 15?
We schedule them every 15 minutes. And, if you're gonna do, I think it was like 20, takes us 5 hours. So,
Yeah.
it's up to you how long,
And the 15 minutes worked pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
It seemed like we had enough time on almost all.
Yeah.
Maybe one or two ran a little long.
I think we were usually the cause of those running long.
Yeah.
So if we can get the deadline for the applications to be turned back into Ms. Vincent by December 2nd, that kind of gives basically all of Thanksgiving and even a little bit more. Would that work, December 2nd? Okay. And then we'll figure out a date to do the interviews, and then figure out maybe a date to do the action item too for those appointments.
Sounds good.
That work?
So, last thing, when you're talking about can staff begin engaging and procuring consultants, are you just talking about getting pricing and?
Correct, we're
and-
starting at least through the procurement piece. We haven't bought anything, paid for anything, it's just the RFPing, starting to,
Kind of find out what's out there?
correct, and who's out there, who's available, and start to
We can
understand.
certainly let the committee use that information.
And, and what particular functions are you, I'm not sure on what this consultant,
Well, I mean, it could be, probably more than likely, it'd be either an architectural consultant or engineering. That kind of helps, again, facilitate the process, but also just provide the expertise that we need on bidding or really price estimation, things of that nature. And
that still allows the committee to decide what they need and.
I would think so. I mean, I would ask that staff help try to facilitate who those vendors are, just because our city engineer knows them, and works with them on a regular basis. But as far as, what the committees might need and that analysis, I mean, I think that's what the consultants are there for. Good?
Okay?
So again, just to recap, yes on some kind of a program, GO or debt, broader in scope, November 2023. Obviously, yes on a committee, application process to be provided to you all very soon with input back to Jan and Ms. Vincent as soon as possible. And then we'll get those applications, once we're finalized with that, those applications will then be sent to you all then send it to folks that you would like to have be considered, with the deadline of around December the 2nd. And then we'll gather those and then start scheduling times for those interviews so that you can pare it down to 15. If you all decide, you know what, we really need to go a little bit more, we'll work with you. It's just trying to keep the 15, but if it needs to get bigger, I understand. Because I know it happened on the Parks Board, so, but you know, if we can make it manageable and then allows us to start working on procuring again, we're not looking at spending money, but just starting that selection process. on working with the consultants. The other thing too, and I almost forgot, on your December the 6th meeting, we would like to also invite our financial advisor to come and visit and just do a kind of see if you all have any questions about just financing and the bond markets and the different types of debt instruments. I mean, we'll certainly bring them back for the committees to be educated on that as well. But would like to invite them to you all if you have any questions of them.
I'd almost rather wait on that till January, if that's okay, but,
Okay.
I mean, we could,
Okay, we can
I'll
work on that.
forget everything over Christmas.
Okay. Anything else
That was a
that we need to
joke.
cover? All right.
I know.
Okay, so that's all my part. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Kiplinger so he can go through those immediate needs, and hopefully we can get some direction on those items as well.
Mayor and Council, Keith Kiplinger, your fire chief. Just as a refresher, in this year's budget, you've currently funded $594,000 to repair the building envelopes, make some needed repairs on stations 1, 3, and 4. Those are largely, the vast majority of that work is at Station 1 on North Street, with some work on the foundation, exterior walls, and roof are the big ticket items there. And that will require some design work so that we can scope it, so that we know that we're bidding apples to apples with regard to roof and the way those repairs are done. So that'll take a design professional. And again, those are currently funded. The two stations that didn't have any funding as we were going through the CO process were Station 2 at Main and Martin Luther King, and Station 5, which is the downtown Central Fire Station. We estimate, after taking a look, that the cost of design and repair of those two buildings, and again, this is just making those repairs to keep the building envelope safe, to stop the water from running in. At Station 5, it is adding a fire suppression and fire alarm system, which is an upgrade to the building, would not necessarily be a stranded cost. If we were to move out of the building in the future or repurpose it, that would be likely required for any future occupant. We can do any or all of this, or we can do none of it. It's all the way up to you to decide. Again, that $800,000 estimate, we're not asking you to vote on spending $800,000 tonight, but to allow us to start in the design process where we'll really sharpen a pencil and make sure that those repairs are the ones that an engineer or architect recommends that we make, and that they can give us a little better idea. And we'll be back with a budget amendment after we have some of that design done. So the only ask is that we kind of get a head nod to move forward on all or part or none of this, so that we can do what we need to do to move forward.
Okay, council?
Head nod on all for me.
Yeah.
I'm nodding.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, Mr. Bartlett and I'll get to work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Brian Bray, once again, your Community Services Director. Much like Chief Kiplinger, the numbers haven't changed for parks, and so I'll be very brief. Just to tell you that the restrooms that we were referring to, or rather the parks we're referring to, are at Mill Pond Park, Ritchie Street Park, Bonita Creek Park, Lake Nacogdoches West, and Robert McCrimmon Park. And so these are the restrooms that were slated to be demolished and rebuilt should the COs have passed. Since that didn't happen, we don't have any funding to remove these unsafe structures. I think Ms. Sal gave you some details while I was out of town 2 weeks ago that staff reviewed these, and ultimately the decision was, or recommendation from staff was, they needed to be demolished. And so that cost is approximately $20,000. They also looked at the two restrooms that are located at Lake Nacogdoches West Park and determined that they felt fairly confident that they could rehabilitate those. They are still working, unlike those other ones that we just covered. With an investment of about $50,000, they could have those restrooms back running in a decent order for several more years. This is not a long-term fix. This is simply to allow us to get several more years down the road. As Ms. Sal also mentioned, we had just opened bids prior to your previous council meeting. At an upcoming council meeting, in fact, November 15th, the following meeting, you'll actually have an item on your agenda for consideration of to award a bid to a contractor to construct restrooms that are on the list there in front of you. And as Mr. Canizares had mentioned during that presentation, the projects are under budget, and so it's approximately a $250,000 budget amendment that will also be on your next council agenda. So the total immediate needs for the parks is to demolish those 4 restrooms at Bonita Creek, Mill Pond, Ritchie Street, and Robert McCrimmon for $20,000, and rehabilitation of those 2 at Lake Nacogdoches West. So unlike Chief Kiplinger, we do not need to engage design services, just sort of a head nod so that staff can start getting some things lined up before expending any money, obviously, so that staff can start figuring out which contractors do demolition, and so we can start looking at some suppliers for repairs. So that is the request this evening, is just a, yes, would you like us to proceed, or leave the restrooms boarded up and don't touch them?
I think,
I just have one question about Mill Pond. Those are stainless steel structures in there?
Yes, so the demolition ones of Bonita, Mill Pond, Ritchie, and Robert, and I'm not gonna step out on a limb and say stainless steel, but yes, they are a metal design from the 1970s. And most of the dividers inside where they join the concrete are rusted and are breaking.
So I was asking when I was at TML about the stainless steel structures, because I would just appreciate it if we could look to see if they're either salvageable or saleable or whatever, and I'll just leave it up to you. That's just my.
Are you referring to scrap purposes type, or?
Maybe, I don't know, because
Okay.
they had, of course, vendors say whatever they're gonna say at TML, but one vendor had said, you could use those stainless steel structures because they still look good, but just look into it. That's all I'm asking
ma'am.
you to
Be
do,
happy to.
and see if we can, cut the cost a little bit, but other than that, you have my head nod, so.
Thank you.
The demolition of the 4 restrooms, is there gonna be temporary facilities?
We currently have an ADA and a regular portable toilet at each of those each of those parks. And that's an approximate cost of $5,000 per year per park.
Per year, right? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
anything? Okay. All right, I think
Thank
you
you.
got her nod. Thank you.
Mayor Council, Steve Bartlett, Director of Public Works. So as we spoke last time, ours is a little different approach. What I'm asking you to consider for some near-term needs are actually part of the bigger baskets of things that I gave you all a wonderful notebook that I assume you immediately read. So these are pieces of those that some of them we'd like to move forward with sooner as opposed to later. Again, it was comprised of some immediate needs in storm drainage, approximately 1.4 million. That's about 7 of the areas of 22 we have slated that I did send to you. These are shovel-ready projects, and there's currently, of course, no other funding source for those. In the water system, and this is a very rough budget number, we have not pulled these apart, but you had also in your notebook a list of what we call water quality improvements. So these are areas that we're struggling with. They may be hard items that are pumps or chlorinators, but these are items that affect water quality, separate from just a distribution system. And so we'd like to prioritize those because we think the water quality is ahead of Band-Aiding pipes. So again, this is a very, very rough number. We kind of rounded out, as you know in a minute, we'll talk about ARPA dollars, and so we kind of filled the hole up. It may or may not cost $3 million. In fact, we're hoping certainly less, which will give us monies to distribute elsewhere. Again, no funding in the CIP, and these are super high priority projects for us. And then jumping to wastewater, again, this is about also 7 of about 26 projects we showed you in the notebook. They are shovel-ready at this point in time. We have very refined cost estimates, as you saw, and that's why we can kind of nail these numbers at 1.871 million. And we'd like to also proceed with those as well. So jump straight forward here. Originally, if you remember, our ARPA dollars, we asked you to do water and sewer. Primarily water and sewer, and you do pay for a grants consultant that helps administer and oversee this for about $281,000. What we'd like to do is restructure what the chief presented to you and what Mr. Bray presented to you, and do the water, sewer, drainage, and storm, do the chief's fire station work, do the park restrooms, have some pile of money for architectural and engineering fees. Those have not been negotiated, but we have selected firms through the correct process. We're in the middle of negotiations, and those fees may go down. And then again, the grants consultant that we've already committed to. So that boils together back to the total 8.1 million-ish dollars that we have in the bank. And so tonight, staff is asking for And you've head nodded, I think, all these projects except for mine, and so we're putting them in the pile and asking if we can use what's available cash reserves that, if you were ARPA dollars to fund all this in a fashion. Please understand that if 3 million turns into 2.7, we have $300,000 that can move. If $800,000 for the stations turns into 9, we can move things around. So these have some flexibility. They have contingencies built in. Some are 30,000-foot estimates and some are 3 feet estimates. But understand the numbers could flux a little bit. And we'll come back and forth to you if we need to modify budget amendments that we've done. But our intention is to spend the whole pile and to do basically these things. So be happy to answer any questions.
And it has to be, if you do have 300,000 left over after one project, it has to be part of this overall project, all right? You can't put it in other systems as far as.
So the flexible use of
Drainage.
these monies are
Yeah.
very broad. So,
okay.
in fact, yeah, and so we can. It would be something you would guide us and direct us on. But if we come in under budget, which would probably be the second time in my life, but if we come in under budget in civil work, then we may come back to you and say, hey, can we pull a couple of more of the water projects out, that you have in your notebook? So that's going to be the approach. We'll come back to you with some other needs. These are monies, simply put, funds we got that we intend on spending on needs. And so if we can do more things with it, great. Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
thank you.
So are you ready for my
I am.
question? I know we've talked about this quite a bit. And in the drainage projects, there are only 2 drainage projects that have structure concerns and damage, and that means people lose their homes. And one is currently funded, and the other, or is in the
Designed.
design. It's been designed, and it's also considered in this package. The other is for Kenbrook, and those people are in danger of losing their homes, and I would like that to be included in this package specifically. And if we need to go to other funds, we can, or I think you'd mentioned they can be funds distributed elsewhere or whatever they may come in. But I very, very much would like that Kenbrook drainage project to be added to this. And, just because we shouldn't be allowing people to lose their homes. And there are only 2, one's funded and the other's not.
Have you designed a Kenbrook drainage project yet?
So the Kenbrook is one of the ones that are not designed at this point, and so we would engage the consultants that we've already, I guess, selected but are negotiating with to design that particular project during the course of this.
And you think we can get that done with the ARPA?
Within the ARPA, we have about 24 months-ish left
Right.
or so, yes.
And this one it's a simple kind of,
It is.
yes.
And how many residents are involved in Kenbrook?
Well, on this street, 5, 10, something like that. It also, and that's the structure damage, but it also is the street flooding in addition to that. So you've got a lot of problems out there.
The Kenbrook project is on your list.
It's already,
Right,
it's already there.
it's on your list.
It's
It's
just
just
not
one,
funded.
we had selected, because ARPA has a time clock, and it's clicking, and so we had selected projects already designed, allow us to go out to bid after the first of the year. We would basically separate that one project. I think it was 275,000 was our estimate in your notebook there.
Kenbrook?
For Kenbrook, yes.
So where would that money come from?
Well, I think there's enough contingencies and role in this that I can just comfortably tell you that we can move forward and.
Without
Yeah,
changing
without changing anything, especially like the water one was such a coarse number for us. So I'm comfortable that we can, because of the size of it, that we can accomplish it one way or the other. And like I say, in part of this, we already have engineers on staff, and so we'll be able to jump right in and do that design. It's a straightforward design, so.
So that brings up so there are only, of this list that we've identified, there are only 2 that we know that are structure dangers.
Yeah, and I think everything on your list, those are only 2 that had at least some incident of structure flooding at one point in time. Maybe not necessarily every time. There was, a lot of them were nuisance flooding, they were erosion, they were street flooding that, blocks traffic. But these are the only 2 we knew that had water on the carpet.
And this is a way for us to address both of those.
So one of them was already being addressed, yes, sir, and this one was just not addressed in this pile, because it wasn't designed. And so we can move forward. This design shouldn't take 60 days or something like that, plus some review time. So I think we can accomplish it,
If we
is
can-
what I'm saying, yeah.
If we can roll that in, let's do it.
Okay, I just needed your direction, because I proposed to you one thing, and council just needs to direct us how you want to do it.
That's good.
Head nod again, is that what you need, or? Yeah. I think
And a
we're
big
all-
smile.
Oh, wait.
Any other questions?
My only other comment is anything we can do, because the, water rates, even if we can, anything we can do to have as much, water, covered, wastewater projects and water system out of ARPA dollars.
Understood,
Okay, thanks, sir.
understood. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, did you get what you needed?
I did, thank you.
I think we're good, Mayor.
Okay, all right, so we will move to number 6, executive session. Executive sessions for city council to receive information, deliberate on matters specified in subchapter D of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Council may reconvene in open session to vote on the matter. A, consultation with city attorney pursuant to Texas Government Code, section 551.071, deliberation regarding attorney's advice concerning pending or contemplated litigation or a settlement offer, or on a matter with which the duty of the attorney to the government body under Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter. So we will adjourn to executive session at 6:57 PM.
Mr. Chairman, is there
Council has returned from executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code, section 551.071, consultation with attorney, at 7:23 on November the 10th. And with no action to be taken, this meeting's adjourned.